Imagine for a moment you're about to make just a simple decision. Maybe what's for dinner tonight, maybe something bigger, like a career change. You make the decision, and, well, if someone asks why, you probably have a reason ready, right?
Sure, you think you do. I wanted something quick, or, I weighed the pros and cons carefully.
Exactly. But what if those reasons, the ones we think are driving us, what if they're incomplete? Or maybe even like made up after we've already decided.
That's a fascinating and, frankly, slightly unsettling idea about how our minds work.
Hmm.
We're often building these logical narratives for ourselves and for others, too,
Right, to make it seem like it's all pure reason.
when really there could be something much deeper, often unconscious, actually pulling the strings.
And that gets right to the heart of what we're diving into today. Why do we humans do the things we do? We're digging into the work of Robert Sapolsky, especially his incredible book, Behave.
It's such a monumental piece of work.
Yeah.
He tackles that fundamental human paradox, doesn't he?
He really does. How can we be, the species capable of the absolute worst violence and misery?
Unbelievable cruelty, yeah.
And yet, at the very same time, be the most altruistic, the most compassionate, the most cooperative species out there? It's a huge challenge to make sense of those extremes.
And Sapolsky's approach, the mission here really isn't just about listing behaviors. It's about understanding the context, the layers upon layers of context.
Yeah, like how the same physical act, flexing your finger to pull a trigger, can be horrifying in one situation and, well, genuinely heroic in another. Context is everything.
Absolutely. So what this deep dive aims to do is give you, the listener, a kind of shortcut to grasping these really complex, multi-layered influences on why we act the way we do.
We're going from milliseconds before an action,
Literally, brain signals firing.
all the way back to millennia of evolution. It's about uncovering how much operates beneath our conscious radar. It's quite a journey.
It really is. Eye-opening.
Okay, so let's zoom right in. The immediate moment, milliseconds to seconds before something happens. Our brains are incredibly fast.
Lightning fast. Take the amygdala. That's a key area for fear, anxiety, aggression, that sort of primal stuff.
And the research here is, well, it's pretty startling. Studies with American white subjects looking at faces.
Yeah, get this. Their amygdala lights up in just 60 to 80 milliseconds when they see the face of someone from another race.
60 milliseconds. That's almost instantaneous, before you even really know you've seen a face properly.
Exactly, often before conscious awareness fully registers. And this isn't trivial. It has real implications for bias.
How so?
Well, in simulations, this kind of rapid unconscious response can contribute to errors, like mistaking a cell phone for a handgun.
Wow.
And think about this. The part of the brain that specializes in faces, the fusiform face area, it doesn't activate as strongly for other race faces. Sapolsky puts it pretty bluntly. He says it's like their face doesn't count as much.
Yeah.
It suggests that this us versus them categorization might be happening at a really deep pre-conscious level.
That's sobering, how deep those initial reactions might go. And it's not just the amygdala, right? There's the insular cortex, too.
Right, the insula. Usually, we think of it for gut feelings, literally, like tasting rotten food that's gustatory disgust.
Yeah.
But in humans, its job is expanded. It also handles moral disgust, even aesthetic disgust.
So the same bit of brain handles bad milk and, say, a moral outrage.
Kind of, yeah. It's like the brain repurposed existing machinery. When we developed ideas about moral wrongs like tens of thousands of years ago, it didn't grow a new morality lobe. It just co-opted the insula.
Huh.
So thinking about things we find morally awful, like historically the horror of lynching victims, activates the insula. But, and here's the kicker, it can also activate for things that are just different. People who look different, pray differently, love differently.
Oh, that's tricky.
It is. Because if your brain wiring starts to equate different with disgusting and disgusting with wrong, well, then your whole ethical compass might be running on this very primitive gut reaction, not exactly higher reasoning.
So our big moral judgments might be tied to this ancient disgust circuit. Wild. And it's not just our internal brain stuff, is it? The environment plays a role, too, even in subtle ways we don't notice.
Absolutely. Our senses are constantly picking up cues. Take smell, for instance. You wouldn't think it, but...
What about smell?
Okay, so one study put people in a room with a really faint, foul smell, like garbage, barely noticeable.
Right.
Turns out those people became more socially conservative in their judgments, more likely to label things or people different from them as wrong, all unconsciously.
No way. Just from a faint, bad smell.
Yeah. And the opposite happened too, the smell of freshly baked cookies.
Makes you hungry.
Well, yes, but it also made people more generous in economic games, more willing to share, cooperate, again, without realizing the smell was influencing them.
So these little sensory inputs are nudging our behavior all the time. Makes you really reconsider, why you felt a certain way about someone or something.
Exactly. And physical state matters too. Hunger, pain, just being tired, they all cloud judgment. There's this one finding about judges in Israel. It's kind of extraordinary.
Yeah, the parole decisions one, that's stunning.
Right. The single biggest predictor of whether parole was granted wasn't the crime, wasn't the prisoner's background. It was how long it had been since the judge ate.
Seriously?
Seriously. Right after a meal break, about a 60% chance of parole. 4 hours later, just before the next break, it dropped to basically zero.
Zero. That's terrifying, actually.
It is, and it's likely not conscious bias. It's about biology. Low blood sugar. It impairs the prefrontal cortex.
The PFC, our brain's CEO, the bit responsible for judgment, impulse control.
Exactly. That's the most recently evolved part. The part that helps us do the hard thing when it's the right thing. And when it's running low on fuel, well,
it takes the easy path, which in this case was just denying to roll. Default to no.
Seems like it. Just easier than engaging in complex deliberation when you're depleted.
And you mentioned the PFC isn't just one monolithic thing.
Correct. Think of it having different departments. There's the dorsolateral part that's like the cold, logical Mr. Spock bit, purely rational calculation.
Okay.
But then there's the ventromedial PFC. That's more about integrating gut feelings, emotional input, social intuition.
Ah, the emotional part of the rational brain.
Sort of. And here's what's really profound, Sapolsky argues. Our best moments, our most compassionate, heroic acts, they often come from that part, from the supposedly irrational emotional inputs.
Not just cold logic.
No. In fact, people with damage to that ventromedial PFC, they become almost pathologically pragmatic, heartless, unemotional decision makers. They might make the logical choice in, say, the trolley problem, but lack the empathy that makes us human.
So our best selves need that emotional gut feeling input. That really reframes virtue. What about the anterior cingulate? That's involved in empathy too, right?
It is. It's involved in registering pain, both our own and others. But there's a depressing finding here, too.
Uh-oh.
Studies show it often activates less when we see pain in someone with a different skin color compared to someone who looks like us.
Wow. Another us versus them bias hardwired in.
Seems like it. And this raises questions about empathy itself. Paul Bloom makes this point. Is feeling someone else's pain always the best thing?
What do you mean? Empathy seems like a good thing.
Well, Bloom suggests it can be limiting. If feeling someone's pain is overwhelming, it might lead to inaction, burnout. Or it might be too narrowly focused on one person, ignoring a larger problem. He talks about detached empathy, or maybe rational compassion.
So, understanding suffering without necessarily being crippled by feeling it intensely.
Something like that. A way to acknowledge and want to help, but maybe keep enough distance to act effectively. It's a challenging idea, definitely.
Okay, let's shift perspective slightly. Zoom out to the recent past hours, days before behavior. Hormones are big players here, right? Like testosterone.
Ah, yes, testosterone. The cliche is simple. Testosterone equals aggression. More T, more fights.
Right, that's the common wisdom.
But is way more nuanced than that. Turns out, testosterone doesn't really cause aggression out of nowhere.
It doesn't. Then what does it do?
It amplifies existing social patterns. It makes individuals more sensitive to triggers for aggression if aggression is how status is gained in their social context.
Okay, unpack that a bit.
So Sapolsky uses this great example. If you gave a bunch of testosterone to Buddhist monks,
Yeah, they wouldn't suddenly start brawling.
probably not. They might, as he puts it, run amok, seeing who could do the most random acts of kindness, because that's how status and respect work in their community. Testosterone basically makes people more cocky, more impulsive, dials down the PFC's influence a bit, and makes them hyper-attuned to status challenges and rewards.
So it fuels the drive for status, whatever form that takes in a particular group. That's fascinating, completely different from the simple roid rage idea.
Exactly. And then there's oxytocin, often called the love hormone or cuddle chemical.
Right. Associated with bonding, trust, calming the amygdala, sounds purely positive.
You think so. And it does promote pro-social behavior, but with a catch.
There's always a catch, isn't there?
Seems that way with biology. Oxytocin makes you more pro-social and trusting towards your in-group, your us.
Okay, like teammates, family, people like you.
Yes.
Wow.
but it simultaneously makes you less trusting, potentially more preemptively aggressive, and sort of spontaneously lousy towards them.
Oh, so it enhances bonding within the group, but sharpens the divide between groups.
Precisely. There was this brilliant study in the Netherlands using the trolley problem dilemma.
The one where you have to decide whether to sacrifice one person to save 5.
That's the one. They gave subjects oxytocin, and it made them more likely to save a character with a typical Dutch name,
Okay.
but more likely to sacrifice a character with a German name or a Muslim name. Push them onto the tracks, basically.
Wow. So the love hormone actually amplified ethnic bias in that life or death scenario.
It exaggerates the us and them fault lines, as Sapolsky says. It's not a universal love potion. It's more like a tribal enhancer.
That's a much darker view of oxytocin. And what about stress hormones? Glucocorticoids, you mentioned they affect PFC development.
Yes, especially early in life. High levels of chronic stress, releasing lots of glucocorticoids, it can really mess with the wiring of the frontal cortex as it's developing.
Oh, so?
It can impair the maturation of those neurons,
Yeah.
basically prune connections poorly. So individuals who experience intense stress early on might have a genuinely harder time with impulse control, emotional regulation, decision-making later in life. Their PSC didn't get wired up optimally.
So early life stress leaves a lasting biological scar on our ability to self-regulate.
It really can. It highlights how experiences in the recent past, even years ago, continue to shape our brain function today.
Which leads us perfectly into thinking about our deeper personal history, years, decades back, childhood experiences, particularly adversity.
Hugely impactful. We now know that significant childhood trauma can physically change the brain. It can shrink the hippocampus, which is crucial for memory, and parts of the frontal cortex.
The decision-making center again.
Right. While at the same time, the amygdala, the fear and anxiety center, can actually get larger and become hyperreactive.
So less control, more fear and reactivity. That sounds like a recipe for problems.
It definitely increases the risk for anxiety disorders, depression, problems with emotional regulation, impulse control issues. And get this, sometimes, after severe adversity, the amygdala can actually develop connections that inhibit the frontal cortex.
The fear center tells the control center to shut up.
Essentially, yeah. Like the amygdala says, nope, we're doing the survival response. You rational thinkers just try and stop me.
Yeah.
It's a biological override driven by past trauma.
And that connects to things like addiction, too.
Yes, trauma can damage the dopamine system, the
Yeah.
reward pathway, increasing vulnerability to addiction. But it's crucial to add, biology isn't pure destiny here. Some people endure awful childhoods and somehow come through remarkably resilient. As Sapolsky says, some endure miserable childhoods just fine. We don't fully understand why yet. It's complex.
A resilience factor is important. It's not a foregone conclusion. And you mentioned earlier the PFC doesn't fully mature until around age 25.
That's right. It's the last part of the brain to come fully online.
Why so late? What's it learning all that time?
Well, think about what it needs to navigate. The social world is incredibly complex. The PFC has to learn not just the rules, but the exceptions, the hypocrisies, the rationalizations.
Like when it's okay to tell a white lie. Or darker things.
Exactly. When is cooperation expected? When is competition okay? When, chillingly, is violence against them rewarded, while violence against us is condemned? It's learning the nuances, the contradictions, the justifications of its specific culture.
So maturation isn't just growing more brain, it's fine-tuning.
Yes, it's mostly about pruning, getting rid of inefficient connections, strengthening useful pathways. It's sculpting the brain to fit the social environment, warts and all.
And this shaping starts even earlier than childhood, right? Even in the womb.
Absolutely. The fetal environment is critical. We are shaped by our environment before we even take our first breath.
What's an example of that?
The Dutch hunger winter during World War II is a tragic but powerful natural experiment. It happened in 1944, a period of intense famine.
Okay.
Fetuses who were in their third trimester during that starvation period. 60 years later, they had a nearly 20-fold higher risk of developing diabetes, obesity, hypertension.
20 times higher, just from prenatal malnutrition.
Yes, and those exposed in the second trimester, higher rates of schizophrenia. It shows just how profoundly that early environment programs are long-term biology and health risks. Very, very relevant.
It really broadens the definition of environment, doesn't it? Back before we're even born. So let's go even deeper now. Centuries, millennia, our ancestral roots, genes.
Right. Genes often get talked about like blueprints. Like, oh, he has the violence gene. But it's not like that at all.
How should we think about them then?
More like recipes.
Yeah.
They provide potential, vulnerabilities, tendencies, but how that recipe turns out depends massively on the ingredients in the cooking process, the environment.
So nature and nurture interacting constantly.
Exactly. There's a well-known example of a gene variant, MAOA, sometimes linked to aggression. But the link only really shows up strongly if the person carrying that variant was also abused as a child.
Ah, so the gene creates a vulnerability, but the environment pulls the trigger.
That's a great way to put it. It's almost never just the gene itself causing a complex behavior. It's the gene interacting with life experience.
And this interplay shapes culture, too, over long periods.
Mhm.
Genes, culture, behavior influencing each other.
Absolutely, they co-evolve. Consider the difference between cultures descended from nomadic pastoralists versus those from settled agriculturalists.
Okay, herders versus farmers.
Yeah. Pastoralists historically lived in environments where their wealth, their livestock was vulnerable and portable. They often developed strong cultures of honor, where you had to react aggressively to any challenge or insult to protect your reputation and deter theft.
Makes sense. You had to seem tough.
Right. And studies suggest that even today, people from regions with that pastoralist heritage might be statistically more likely to react strongly or even violently to perceived insults, honor-related violence. It's like an echo of ancient cultural pressures.
Wow, a cultural residue lasting centuries.
Exactly. Or think about shame versus guilt cultures, a distinction made by anthropologist Ruth Benedict.
What's the difference there?
Broadly speaking, collectivist cultures, often found in East Asia, tend to rely more on external shame. Morality is enforced by the group. What will people think? You've brought dishonor on us. The threat is social exclusion. You can no longer live with us.
Okay, external judgment.
Whereas individualistic cultures, more common in the West, tend to emphasize internal guilt. How could I do that? How am I going to live with myself? The judgment is internal.
Interesting. Is one better than the other?
Not necessarily better, just different cultural tools. Sapolsky notes that shame can actually be quite useful, especially when powerful people seem immune to guilt or legal consequences. Public shaming might be the only recourse sometimes.
That's a really interesting point, and underlying a lot of this seems to be that fundamental us versus them thing again.
It's incredibly fundamental. We humans, like pretty much all social animals, categorize into us and them with, well, stunning speed. It seems almost automatic.
Is it just unavoidable then? Are we doomed to tribalism?
The tendency seems unavoidable, yes, but, and this is crucial, we don't just have one us versus them split in our heads. We have many simultaneously.
Like based on nationality, sports team, religion, workplace.
Exactly. All these potential categories are rattling around in there. And here's the really critical part. It is incredibly easy to manipulate us as to which dichotomy seems most important to us at any given point.
How so?
Think about it. The person you might instinctively feel wary of walking down a dark street, put them in the same jersey as you at a football game, cheering for the same team against a rival.
And suddenly they're your brother in arms.
Instantly, a U.S. category shifted. Which boundary feels most important can be changed in moments, by circumstances, or, more worryingly, by manipulation.
That malleability is both hopeful and kind of scary. And speaking of what drives us, let's talk dopamine, often called the pleasure chemical.
Right, but that's a bit of a misnomer, actually. Dopamine isn't so much about the pleasure of the reward.
No. Then what is it about?
It's about the anticipation of reward, the motivation, the seeking, the pursuit. The biggest dopamine spike often happens right before you get the reward, when you're expecting it.
The chase is better than the catch, dopamine-wise.
Pretty much. And this explains why certain reward schedules are so addictive. Think slot machines or scrolling social media.
You never know when the next like or win is coming.
Exactly. It's unpredictable, intermittent reinforcement. That uncertainty, that magic of maybe, keeps the dopamine system firing, driving you to repeat the behavior, hoping for that next hit. You're constantly chasing the anticipation.
That explains a lot about modern technology addictions.
It really does. And there's a concerning link to stress here, too. Chronic stress can deplete the dopamine system.
What happens then?
It leads to anhedonia, the loss of pleasure, or more accurately, the loss of anticipation and motivation to seek pleasure. You just don't feel like doing anything because nothing seems rewarding anymore.
Which is a core symptom of depression.
A major core symptom. And you can see how prolonged stress, like from the pandemic or other major life disruptions, could contribute to widespread issues with motivation and mood, by impacting this dopamine system.
Okay, so putting all these layers together, the milliseconds, the hormones, the childhood, the culture, the genes, the dopamine, where does this leave us? Particularly on big questions like, well, free will.
Ah, the free will question. Sapolsky takes a pretty strong stance here. He's what you'd call a hard incompatibilist. Meaning he essentially argues that free will, in the traditional sense of being the independent author of your actions, doesn't really exist. He famously says free will is just what we call the biology that hasn't been discovered yet.
Wow. So as we understand more about the biological causes,
the space for some independent chooser just shrinks and shrinks, potentially to nothing. The argument is, if every action is preceded by brain activity, which is influenced by hormones, which are influenced by genes and environment, which were shaped by evolution and past experiences, where does you jump in to make a truly free choice, independent of all that biology?
That's a heavy thought. If we accept that, if we really are nothing more or less than our biology in that moment, what are the implications?
Sapolsky draws two really profound conclusions from this deterministic view.
Okay.
First, there's no justification for ever feeling as if you are entitled to anything more than any other person. Your successes, your talents, they're ultimately a result of immense biological luck. The genes you got, the environment you grew up in, the brain you developed, no room for ultimate entitlement.
That's humbling. And the second conclusion?
Second, there are no rational grounds for ever hating anyone. Because if people's actions are the result of their biology, shaped by factors far beyond their control,
then they didn't truly choose to do the bad thing.
From this perspective, no. No matter how horrific or hurtful their actions were, they didn't have a damn thing to do with the ultimate causes of why they did it. Hating them for it, Sapolsky argues, is like hating a tornado for what it did to your farmhouse. You can protect yourself, you can prevent future harm, but hate doesn't make logical sense if there's no free will.
Wow. Okay, that's a massive reframing of blame, responsibility, even justice. It could feel quite bleak, though, couldn't it? Like, we're just puppets of our biology. Is there no hope for change?
That's the immediate reaction, right? It sounds deterministic and maybe depressing, but here's the crucial counterpoint. Biological plasticity. Our biology can change.
How do we know?
Well, look at history. Sapolsky points to examples. Sweden apparently used to be an incredibly violent place centuries ago. Crazy-ass and violent, he says. Look at modern Sweden. Cultures can change dramatically.
Okay, large-scale cultural shifts. What about individuals?
Absolutely. Think of John Newton. He was a captain of slave ships in the 18th century. Horrific work.
Right.
Years later, he leaves the trade, undergoes a profound transformation, becomes a leading abolitionist, and writes the hymn Amazing Grace about his redemption. That's massive personal change decades after his earlier life.
Amazing Grace came from a former slave ship captain. I didn't know that.
It's quite something. Or think about reconciliation efforts. A Japanese pilot who bombed Pearl Harbor 50 years later meets survivors, apologizes, they become friends. People can change their deepest beliefs and attitudes.
So biology isn't fixed destiny. It can be reshaped.
Exactly. And sometimes the change seems almost instantaneous. The Christmas truce during World War I.
Where soldiers stopped fighting and fraternized.
Yes. In the trenches, sworn enemies just stopped. They changed their us and them categories in hours, days, shared food, sang carols across no man's land. It shows how quickly those deep-seated antagonisms can shift under the right conditions.
That's incredible. A flicker of shared humanity overriding months of indoctrination.
And maybe the most powerful example Sapolsky uses is Hugh Thompson at the My Lai massacre during the Vietnam War.
What happened there?
It was a horrific event where American soldiers killed hundreds of unarmed Vietnamese civilians. Thompson was a helicopter pilot who saw it happening, and in a fraction of a second, he made a choice.
What did he do?
He landed his helicopter between the American troops and the remaining civilians. He ordered his crew to fire on the American soldiers if they continued the killing. He directly defied orders, defied his ease group to save members of the them group, an act of incredible moral courage rooted in a split-second biological reaction against atrocity.
He threatened his own side to save the enemy. Wow.
And Sapolsky notes that people like Thompson, people capable of these moments of unbelievable magnificence, often have very conventional backgrounds. They weren't necessarily rebels or outliers their whole lives.
So it suggests, what? That capacity is in many of us.
It suggests that maybe we are all capable in moments like that of doing something that shows a degree of biological plasticity, a capacity to override conditioning and programming, even in an instant. That's the hopeful message intertwined with the deterministic view.
The biology is powerful, shaping us profoundly, but it's not necessarily rigid. There's potential for change, for plasticity, for grace, maybe.
Precisely. Understanding the biological constraints doesn't have to lead to despair. It can actually lead to more humility, more empathy, and maybe even a more focused effort on creating the conditions that allow for positive change and plasticity.
So, bringing this all together for you, the listener, this deep dive really shows how our behavior, why we do what we do, is this incredibly complex tapestry woven from threads ranging from immediate brain chemistry all the way back to ancient evolution and culture.
And so much of it operates outside our conscious awareness, influenced by things like smells, blood sugar, childhood stress, the hormones flowing through us.
So if we really take that on board, that our actions and the actions of others are so deeply shaped by factors beyond immediate conscious control, what does that mean for how we judge?
Yeah, how do you think about fault or evil or even just a bad decision, whether it's your own or someone else's? Does understanding all this biological complexity make you maybe pause a bit?
Maybe more willing to